Welcome, folks, to episode number, 3 now, right? Three of the Off-Road Insiders podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm joined tonight by...
Hey, I'm Tammy, everyone. How you doing? I'm AKA Jeep Mama. Forgot to add that.
Yeah, right.
So, I've been
like,
out...
Who doesn't know you, really?
Well, yeah, that's true. I'm so famous. Actually, I'm getting pretty famous here in Cheyenne. I'm becoming known as the Duck Lady. I've been ducking Jeeps. It's part of a marketing campaign I came up with. Well, some of us came up with at TNT Customs. And I got the local attention of the local news stations, and they came and did a story. The radio stations did a story on their websites. And now, guess what? It's like I'm seeing it on national headlines. The Wall StreetJournal did a story. Fox News did a story. A friend of mine in the DC area listens to Elliot in the morning, and he was talking about it. I
noticed that myself. Like shortly after you said you got some coverage on it, I started seeing this on bigger names, and I'm like, is this related?
I don't know if it's like, people are like, oh, they did a story on it. Maybe.
That's what it is. But if they're talking about it, we have to talk about it too.
Exactly. So, and it's so weird. It's like, hello, people, news media. This has been going on for 2 years now, 3 years.
Yeah.
Almost.
Well, mainstream media, it takes them a little while to catch on.
Exactly. So anyway, I've been doing that. And also yesterday, so cool, I took my first scenic-by-way drive in Wyoming on asphalt, which most scenic byways are asphalt.
Yeah.
It's the Snowy Range Road. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. It was the second scenic byway in the U.S. in 1988. And I crossed over the second highest pass in Wyoming. I was kind of doing a pre-run for my son's coming to visit me in August. And some people there in Maryland's like, oh, why would he want to come for 2 weeks to stay with you? He's going to be so bored in Wyoming. And I'm like laughing, like, hello. So anyway, I did this little trip to see what it was like. And there's a lake up there, Lake Marie, named after the first, I'm giving you guys a little history, named after the first woman to be elected to the Wyoming Legislature in 1910. And by the way, she played a huge role in the women's right to vote. And Nate, did you know that women were allowed to vote here in Wyoming before the rest of the United States? I thought that was pretty cool. And
that sounds like something I probably learned in high school. And
we
forgot.
all forget. I know. I'm really getting into history lately. There's so much history on these trails that we go on. It's just I find it fascinating. I'm sure some of you are probably bored with it, but it
is pretty cool. I live in a pretty historic town, at least locally historic, for the coal industry in this area.
Oh, I'm sure.
And there's all kinds of basically like old ruins in the woods. If I go hike up the mountain behind my house here, I can find like old coal breaker remnants and the old coal mine and all kinds of stuff. And for me, it's just always been there, right? I've never really looked into why or how it got here or when it was built or whatever. And slowly, honestly, my dad is like this huge wealth of information about the area. I find a thing and I ask him about it, and then we talk about it, and he gives me like what he knows, and then I can use that to look up more. And it's kind of neat. It's neat.
Yeah. I don't know. I find it fascinating because there's so much history out there when we are in our Jeeps. You just got to look for it.
Yep.
At the end of this road is Saratoga, Wyoming. So if anyone's ever in the area there, you have to stop by the Hobo Hot Springs. It's a natural hot springs. It smells like rotten eggs. Apparently because I guess a lot of hot springs have sulfur in them.
Yeah.
But this really super rich dude owned the property, and he turned it over to the city. And part of the deal was you cannot charge people to go to these. He wanted it open for the public. Oh. And it's right there along the North Platte River, and the hot springs go into this part of the river, and you can like sit in the river, and it's like a hot tub in the river. And then they also have the hot tubs in the rocks, but it's super hot water in certain areas, but it was really fun.
Well, a lot
So
of times those things are heated by like geothermal,
yeah, it is. It's up from the
which
ground.
which
Yeah.
is heated from like literal magma under the crust,
Uh-huh.
right? So
Yes.
I can understand why it would smell like sulfur.
Yes. But there was a bunch of hot springs. I never got to go to the ones in Pagosa Springs in Colorado, but they are really smelly. You come out smelling like a rotten egg. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
But I bet it's nice and
was really
relaxing, right?
cool. Yeah,
I don't know what sulfur does to your skin.
there was a guy there. I don't know either, but there's minerals in there, and they say it's very healing. And
Yeah.
there was a guy there with arthritis, and he goes there all the time, and he says it makes him feel so much better. So
Hey, whatever works, right?
yeah, exactly. So
Cool.
that was my couple of weeks of being
I've
off from the podcast. How about you? I think you were busy in the garage.
yeah, yeah.
I've been watching you
No,
on social media.
no project is easy when you have a 20-year-old Jeep.
I'm sure.
I talked last time about how I tested the fuel pressure and need a fuel pump. Remember?
Yes.
Well, the fuel pump is inside the tank, right? Where else would it be? I mean, on some older vehicles, it's external, but on more modern, even 20-year-old vehicles, it's inside the tank. So I have to drop the tank to get to the fuel pump. Well, if you've ever dropped the tank on a Jeep, in theory, it's simple. There's like 7 bolts that hold it up.
Isn't all of it simple with
You
the Jeep?
support it, you take the nuts off, and it's supposed to come down, and you disconnect all the stuff, right? Well, this is the second time I've had the tank out. Last time, it was a struggle. I replaced all the hardware except for one bolt because that bolt was captured by the frame, right? So like the frame sandwiched to the bottom of the body,
Okay.
and I couldn't get it out. So I
Was it
did
rusted in there or something? Or
well, no. So there's a cross member that goes across the frame, and then the body is right on top of that cross member. Well, the top of the cross member is open. So you could, if you could get up there, drop a new bolt in, right? The bolt is a carriage bolt, so it's got that square notch
Right.
or whatever
Mhm.
shoulder on it, right? And that drops into a square-shaped hole in this cross member. So theoretically, you shouldn't have to get a wrench on top, right? So they did it so that you could remove this thing without having to take the body off the Jeep. Well, the 3 of them, 2 of them, whatever, 3 of them, you can get up there to replace the hardware, but this one is too close to the body, right? And since I don't have a body lift or anything, there's no room. So I couldn't replace that one last time I did the tank. So of course, you know which one was a problem this time.
Mhm.
That one.
Isn't there like it's the theory of something that whatever goes wrong will go wrong? I forget.
Oh
There's a
yeah, it's
name for
Murphy's
that.
Law.
Yeah, thank you.
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law.
I should
Yes.
print that and hang it on my garage wall because
Yeah.
that's how my projects usually go. But so anyway, and you can't get a grinder or something up here to cut the thing off. So I was going back and forth. Do I use a torch to cut it off? Do I use the plasma cutter?
Could you get
We're
a little
literal-
Dremel in there? Could you get
We're
a little
literal
Dremel?
inches from my gas tank. So anything that's going to make sparks and hot, I'm like really
Oh,
worried about.
yeah.
So that's what I finally did. I took my Dremel tool. I'm like, I've got the
Oh.
Dremel. I'll try that. I got up there with a cutoff wheel, and sure enough, I was able to get the nut off. And I got the tank out. Well, once I got it out, I'm looking at my skid plate under the tank, and it is just demolished from all the years of being drug over rocks and things. It's all like bent backwards,
I
and
was gonna say it was a 20-gallon tank, and now it's a
I can-
10-gallon tank.
I can probably get it back in, but once it was out, I'm like, I should really just take the opportunity to finally get a gas tank skid. So I ended up going to Metal Cloak and ordered a gas tank skid for $500 freaking dollars because they ain't cheap. There were cheaper options, but believe it or not, most gas tank skids require a body lift because they lift the tank up a little bit to get it out of harm's way. I don't have a body lift, and I'm not about to put a body lift on just to put on a gas tank skid.
And this is for the LJ, right?
Yep, this is for the LJ or the TJ. They're pretty much identical as far as
right.
gas tanks are concerned. So I ordered that. Metal Cloak is like a week to 2 weeks out on shipping. And I don't know if you've ever ordered. You have a Metal Cloak lift, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't order it. Adam's Jeep did.
Okay. When you order from them,
everything.
when you order from them, they call you. They actually call you and let you know how long they think it's going to be before it ships and all that. I thought that was really cool. Anyway, so they called me, said it could be 1 to 2 weeks. Now, in a week and a half from now, I have the Jeep Jamboree to go to guide, right? So I'm like, do I put the old tank back in and then drop it again when I get back? Do I leave it out and hope it gets here before the Jamboree?
You take your wife's Jeep.
Yeah, right. Take her Jeep.
I
Leave
put a
her.
link. I put a link in the show notes for you. I don't know if that would work for you.
Skid plates for the LJ. Oh, for TNT. You know what? You worked there, and I didn't even look.
Yeah. And we could have one sitting on the shelf, and I could.
You might
it up tomorrow.
You might. Well,
probably
at any rate,
the metal cloak one.
I did. I already paid for it. It's already not on the way, but it should. That was a week ago that I ordered it already.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully it'll be here. Like it'll ship this week, and I'll have it for this weekend, and I can actually get it put in. And then as I'm sitting there with it out, Genrite makes a kit to put an access door in the floor of the Jeep, so you can get to the fuel pump.
Oh,
because it's right under the body.
Right.
So I'm going back and forth because last time I had it out, I knew these kits existed. I thought next time, if I ever have to pull this out again, I'm putting a door in. Right.
So what do you cut the floor out and then attach this somehow? You
cut a big rectangle out of your floor, and then they give you this frame that bolts to the floor, and then like a hinged, I think, door that goes on top that you can bolt down. Or maybe it's not hinged. I don't know, but it's an access panel. So you can take it out, and then you can get to the whole top of the tank. Well, the top of the tank collects all kinds of mud and grime and everything. So even if I never have to do the fuel pump again, I'll be able to get to the top of the tank to clean it off.
Right. You can put a hose down there and
So I ordered that too for another $200 because it's Genrite and they're expensive.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
So by the time this is all done, my simple $160 fuel pump replacement is going to cost me almost $1,000.
Oh,
it's like, oh my God. So total snowball. Oh, and I ended up having to lift the body off of the Jeep to get to that bolt.
How do you do that?
I took out one side of the body mount bolts. There's these 4, I think, bolts that go straight through the frame and into the body. I took those out, and then I used my high lift jack to lift up one side of the body tub. And then I was able to get just like 2 inches so I could get my hand in there and get to the bolt. And I dropped a new carriage bolt in. So as long as that one doesn't spin free, which I tested it a whole bunch, and it should be good to go. But yeah, definitely snowball effect for this particular project.
Always seems to do that. Always.
The other thing I wanted to mention quick before we move into the main topic, I talked about that video game last time. Remember the off-road mechanic simulator video game?
Fun. Did you try
I found that they have a demo of it. The actual game doesn't come out until later this week, I think. But there's a demo where you can download it and try it out and just basically get an idea for the game. It's kind of fun. I don't know how it's going to play out for the average person, the average video game player, but the mechanic part of it is done really well. You actually have the premise is you inherited a shop and you have a vehicle, right? And you're supposed to try to like compete in these things to get money to then build up your shop and your rig and whatever. And you get jobs that come in like repair jobs, right? So you're basically running an off-road shop. Well, I don't know. There's like a piece of your vehicle will wear out. Say it's, I don't know, the differential, right? You actually have to disassemble all of the components of the suspension, take off the tires, right? Take off the sway bar. And they did it really well that all the components that are there look about right now. I didn't do this on a Jeep, but we'll see when we get to the point where I can actually do this on a Jeep because I'll know what's supposed to be under a Jeep.
It might be if it's true to how it really works, it would be kind of an interesting way to teach yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd use it as a teaching thing, but it is definitely, it does, as well as a video game can do, it does capture the general idea of like, oh, I'm going to upgrade gears. I click a button and there's gears. No, right? It's you have to do all this work to get to them, do the thing, and then undo all the work you just did to put it all back together, right? They did a pretty good job. Let's see. Someone, CeeLo asked what it's called. It's like Off-Road Mechanic Simulator, I think. It's in last week's show notes. But you can get it on Steam, the demo, for free.
For some reason, I'm commenting as Off-Road Insiders. I should be commenting as Tammy.
Yeah, if you do it from inside a StreamYard, it's going to come through as
Yeah.
Off-Road Insiders. But that's fine. Whatever.
I'm off-road insiders today, folks. If you're in the chat room, if you're listening to this and you've downloaded this like a couple days after we've done the podcast, you guys can listen to us live on YouTube
Yeah.
and chat with us in our
Yep.
chat room. We have several folks in there right now.
Yep. Come on, get with the program.
Yeah.
It's the year 2023. You don't have to listen to stuff later. You can listen to it live.
While we're recording it.
And listen to the mistakes that may or may not get edited out when I do the audio only version.
Depends on how lazy you feel, right?
Yeah, right. Or how many beers I've had.
There you go. I almost poured myself a glass of wine, but I thought I better be good. It was a long day. Oh, today, so we do powder coating. So we get people from all over bringing us in fences from some ranch or gates or parts for vehicles, motorcycle frames, that kind of stuff. But today we had this big, huge, it was probably 7 foot by, or not 7 foot, 7 inches by 7 inches, like a big pipe. It was like some sort of gate thing.
Okay.
And it's been sitting on our shop all weekend, and they lifted it up with the forklift to move it so they could get some other racks in to powder coat it. And there was underneath the plate was this gooey, gunky yuck. And all of a sudden this odor, we all are like, moo, moo. A rat. Somehow when the guy was building this thing, we think it was a rat or a weasel or something, got into this tube, and then he put a plate on the bottom to stand it up. And it must have died in there. I don't know, but it was so disgusting. We had to clean out the shop and
break out the hazmat gear.
Yeah, the one guy who does the powder coating, he's like, I'm not touching it. If I am, I'm going home today. So this other guy goes, I'll do it. And so I wasn't there to watch it. I thank goodness, but the shop smelled like death. Yeah. Anyway.
Literal death.
Yes.
Wow. That's pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't even imagine. All right, so we're 20 minutes in. We should probably get to the main topic.
Oh yes, we're a little over. Let's.
Well, we got talking.
Yeah,
it's fine.
And we talked about some cool stuff.
Yeah. So
we're going to talk about recovery gear now. What you should have in your vehicle, whether it's a Jeep or a Tacoma or a whatever.
Yeah, honestly, this is
vehicle you use.
Like I'm sure that depending on the vehicle you're in, especially if you're in like a very small vehicle, I didn't think about that, like a UTV or something. This stuff may differ slightly, but we're talking about generally full-size rigs here.
And I just want to clarify, I have taken many off-road classes, several recovery classes with Kyle from Off-Road Consulting in PA, John with Nora, Northeast Off-Road Adventures in New York, and Charlene Bauer with Ladies Off-Road Network. And they all are so smart, and they have so many great tips, and they are really good at teaching about recovery and changing your tire and tips when you're wheeling.
Right.
We're going to have links to all those places. And Kyle and Nora, they offer off-road training classes if you're in the Pennsylvania and the New York areas. Very good training to take.
And this Kyle will do, I don't know about everybody else, I assume they all will do this. They'll do off-road, they'll do classes for not just like, oh, I want to learn how to recreationally wheel, but for emergency services, for example. My dad, who I mentioned earlier, is a volunteer for our local fire company, and they have an ATV, right, with a winch on it. Mm-hmm. And after I told him about Kyle, he said, does he do training? Yeah. So he called up Kyle, and he's like, I would like you to train the fire company on how to safely use this stuff. And he did. He came and he spent a day teaching them how to do stuff. So, it's not just to go out and have fun wheeling. It's for like legit safety, right? Because this stuff, I just want to touch on that quick before we get into that. Recovery is not just hook a strap on your buddy's rig and floor it to try to get them out. You might see that all over YouTube, and it might look real cool. You got to be safe, right? You have to be safe when a vehicle is in a weird position. You can't just jump in. You got to think about it. You Got to make sure that everything that you're doing is safe. And if you're not sure how to approach that, training is a great way to learn that in a safe environment.
And you got to make sure you have the proper gear and you're using the proper gear.
Right.
And the gear you do have, you have to make sure you know how to use it, because some of this gear, if you don't know how to use it right, can be pretty deadly. One of the first items, well, before you buy any of this stuff, you really should look at your vehicle and make sure you have 2 good tow points on your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important.
Yeah, most off-road bumpers, if you're upgrading bumpers, will have tow points
Correct.
attached. However, you get what you pay for. If you
Right.
buy a $100 Chinesium bumper, I wouldn't trust the tow points. They're probably just for show. I would,
Correct.
if you're going to use it off-road, go get a good one.
And it really, you should look for American made.
Yeah.
I believe that it's just they're better quality. And the companies here in the US aren't just making them just to make them. They know
Mhm.
that it's for recovery, and they're going to do a good job in making
And
them.
usually these are folks who started out hobbyists, just like us.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
My rear bumper came from A to Z Fabrication, which unfortunately Zach has passed away a couple years ago. But his
I
shop
didn't
was
know that.
his
Oh,
shop
wow.
was bought out by EMS Off Road, which is also local.
Uh-huh.
So if I really wanted to go get another one just like it, I could get it from them. But I trusted him. That's what I bought it. My front bumper I made myself. Right. So who can you trust better than yourself? Right.
Right.
But so I know how well those recovery points are attached.
And I'm going to do a little shameless plug here, but TNT Customs Bob has been doing this.
Right.
He is one of those guys, and he cares about his product.
Right.
So that's what you got to look for. Those kind of people. They're not out there just to make a buck. They care about the industry.
Right. Right. Small shops. I would definitely go to a small shop.
Right. So, okay, you have your tow points, a recovery strap. Everybody should have a recovery strap in their vehicle, and you should know the difference between a recovery strap and a tow strap, because there's a difference, right?
Yeah. So a recovery strap will be designed to take shock loads, right? The example I gave before, where you just gun it and try to pull your buddy out. You have to do that sometimes when you're recovering. Now, obviously, do it under a controlled circumstance. A tow strap or a tow rope will be designed for I gradually put tension on it and the tension stays, right? That's referred to as generally a static load versus a dynamic or a shock load where you yank it. And then what we didn't touch on in the notes here are those kinetic ropes,
Right,
the
the bubba
Yankum ropes and
ropes.
whatever
Yep.
that are like, they stretch, and that's part of their design, right?
They're kinetic, right?
Yeah, kinetic ropes.
Yeah.
I don't have one of those, but I really want to get one because they look really handy.
I have one, and I've used it several times. I seem to win a lot of stuff when I was at Rush Creek. I got my winch. I won my winch. I won the bubba rope. Rush Creek is good for winning stuff.
I've only been in one raffle at Rush Creek, and I didn't win anything. In fact, that was when Zach had passed away. They had
I'm so sorry about that.
A thing for his family to raise money. So I put some tickets in for that.
Right.
But
you didn't win.
Didn't win a thing. I was trying to win a winch at the time.
When you do get these things, all of this recovery gear, most all of it's going to have a load rating on it. They're going to have the tags, like when you rip the tags off a mattress, you have those kind of tags on your recovery gear. Don't rip those off because they're important. They give you your load rating, your braking strength. For example, if you have a recovery strap, you're going to want to have a braking strength of over twice of the maximum weight of your vehicle. So let's say your Jeep weighs, or whatever your vehicle weighs, 5,000 pounds. You want a recovery strap that's going to have a braking strength of over 10,000 pounds.
Right. And I've heard the same rule of thumb when you're judging for a winch. Some people say 2 times, some people say 2.5.
And you can cheat the winches a little bit if you use like the shackles and all that kind of stuff too, because you can cut that rating in half.
Right. But we'll talk about winches in a second.
Yes. So then we have a tree saver. By the way, a little tip, and I did this on my YouTube channel. I gave a little sneak preview. I like to keep my recovery gear where I can grab it from my driver's seat, where it's easy access, so I don't have to get out, and I could be off camber. Actually,
Yep.
John from Nora taught me this. You could be off camber, could be in a dangerous situation. You don't really want to get out of your Jeep and have to go open the back tailgate to get your stuff out, or you could be in mud. So I keep my recovery strap, my gloves, my soft shackles, and my D-rings and my snatch block underneath my front seat, my driver's seat, and my tree saver, which is another item you should have, I keep under my passenger seat. And a tree saver is if you have to somehow use the tree to pull yourself out, or use the tree as a snatch block
Right.
point. You want the tree saver because you want to save the tree, literally. You
Right.
don't want to have that rope dig into the tree, because then you're killing the tree.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus, and especially with a wire rope winch, the stress point that hooking it onto itself can create can actually make the wire rope weaker, where because it goes through the hook and then it bends sharp, right?
right.
That can make it brittle there, and that's not a good thing either, because wire rope winch can be very unsafe, especially if it's brittle.
And then, of course, you have the load rating for the tree saver. The rating, let's see, I'm trying to remember how that works. Maybe you can.
The rating for what? For
the tree saver.
I read through this when you put it in here.
Yeah.
It was I think it said 4 times, was it? Because
Yeah.
you want to go the same rule of thumb, twice as much, but since it's doubled back, you then double it again. Let me look here. We lost it when we moved the stuff around. 10,000 once, you can pull 20,000. Yeah. But yeah, because it's doubled back and you're hooking it onto itself, the load rating should be higher.
And then you have soft shackles or a D-ring. The soft shackles obviously are soft, and the D-ring is the metal piece. So you're going to want to check those. And the shackles, the load rating, the safe working load, it's called SWL, or working load limit, WLL, are going to be stamped onto those shackles. And you're going to want to have one at least 3.25, which is 3.25 tons. And if you're going to use a soft shackle where you're going to put, like, let's say a tree saver, you wrapped it around the tree and you want to put a D-ring to it, that one you should have a rating of at least 4.75.
Right.
So just pay attention when you're buying these things. And when you do use a D-ring and that pin in the shackle and you're twisting it to tighten it, okay, you tighten it, oh, it's tight, and then move it back a quarter of a turn, because when you hook something up to that D-ring and you're pulling on it, it's going to tighten it. And so you don't want it to be too tight.
It sort of flexes the steel.
Correct.
So I can see that happening. I mean, have you ever tied a knot in a thing, right? And then you put stress on it, and now it's tighter. I don't quite understand how that works with the D-ring, but I have seen it happen, right? Where man, I put this on hand tight, and now I need a tool to open it. I don't understand why this is. Well, it's because of the stresses that were on it. And it sounds counterproductive to tighten it and then loosen it a little bit, right? But that pin's not going to come out. It's going to have an inch or so of thread engagement. That quarter turn isn't going to make it so that it's going to pop out on you, right? So, and you're talking about a couple minutes maybe of load on the thing. It's not like it's sitting there shaking around and vibrating. The thing's going to work its way back out. So, and I guess that's actually another good point, is keep an eye on that stuff. Make sure that the situation hasn't changed while you're trying to do some sort of recovery like that. And I feel like it's worth mentioning that we're covering both metal and non-metal options here. A lot of people, there's a very definite movement away from any metal in your recovery system, right?
Correct.
Sometimes it's hard to get away from, especially if you've already invested in this stuff. Like personally, I've got a mix of soft and steel shackles or D-rings. I've got a mix. One of my Jeeps has a steel hook on the front. The other one has a soft connection point. I got a God, what's the brand now?
The one that the Jeep has.
the one the Jeepcast guys always push.
Is it Factor 55? I don't know.
No, it's not. It's not Factor 55. The rope that I got is from this company that makes hookless ropes. Right? It's got like this thimble on the front instead. It's not. It's not even a metal thimble. It's a plastic thimble.
Huh.
I don't know why I can't remember their name. Anyway, but I have that on my wife's Jeep, which is the more recent winch
Master Pull.
Master Pull. That's it. I like that rope. However, the winch that I bought for mine is a Warn, and it came with a synthetic rope, but a metal hook. So someday I may take off the metal hook and replace it with a soft connection point. But, you know, the hook I feel like is not the dangerous part because that's going to be attached to a thing. But the more you can eliminate, the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steel rope, on the other hand, we've talked about having an episode on this. Steel rope can be very dangerous. The wire rope, right?
Correct.
Or some people call it cable.
Yeah.
There's a specific industry term for steel cable versus wire rope, right? That's why I'm being careful to say wire rope because that's what winch cable is. But if that snaps, the amount of force that's built up in that rope can literally tear people in half, right? And that's not cool. Now there's ways to mitigate that. But again, we'll talk about that in a different
episode. An episode on synthetic versus steel.
Right.
Definitely.
Personally, I see no reason to not buy a synthetic rope, even if it deteriorates faster than a steel rope or wire rope, mainly because it's just so much safer, right? So anyway, I went on a tangent.
What else?
There.
That's your job. That's your job.
My job is to go on tangents.
Yes. Because you're a wealth of knowledge.
See, Tammy gets it. Nate's job is to go on tangents, and it's Tammy's job to keep me on track.
I'll reel you in. That'll be my code. Gloves. You should have a good pair of gloves. I really like the mechanics gloves. I know they're not recovery gloves, but they fit.
They are nice.
And yeah.
They're so tight to your skin that you can have all the dexterity. Now,
right.
Being a Jeep Jamboree trail guide, people don't know this, right? Jamboree trail guides have a bazillion worn recovery gloves because every time we trail guide, they give us a pair. Usually they're the wrong size.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't help if they're too big.
So I give them away to people at Christmas time, but I have a plethora of worn recovery gloves, so that's what I usually use, just because it's what I
have. These are just some things to get you started on your recovery. Kit. But a shovel, they say a shovel. Honestly, I have never ever used a shovel for recovery. I have used a shovel when I was on Hole in the Rock for waste removal or digging.
We don't have to elaborate on that.
We'll move on. Another one.
On the shovel topic, if you go to an Army surplus store, if you get one of those Army entrenching tools, it's a little folding shovel, right? They are very versatile. They have a little pick on one side and a shovel on the other, and you can fold them one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I have carried one of those around with me since I was a kid in the Boy Scouts. Not carried literally, but I've had one available to me since I was a kid in the Boy Scouts. They're so versatile and so useful, and I keep one of those in my Jeep. Like you, I think I've used it a couple times to put out my campfire.
Oh, yeah.
I've never actually used it on the trail.
There is that too. Or to dig out a fire pit if you're first camping.
Yeah.
When people have left their fire.
But it is good to have. I had one incident where I was stuck on a berm of ice, and having something to chip away at the ice was helpful. And I happened to use that shovel when I did that. So I guess technically I've used it in one recovery. So
another item, I swear by these because they saved me on a trail in Arizona. I always would rub my valve stems up against rocks and they'd start leaking, but they're called Colby valves. And you can go over to colbyvalve.com and they're an emergency, or you can get permanent ones. If you rip your valve stem when you're out on the trails, you don't have to take your tire off and put your spare tire on. You just rip your valve stem out, and the Colby valve, you just screw it in and boom, you're good to go. You just air up your tire. But they come in handy. You may never use them. the guy who I didn't have any at the time I did this, but the guy, gosh, I can't remember his name. He has a YouTube channel. He was there with me. Anyway, AZ West Side Wheelers. He was so excited because yes, I finally get to use my Colby valves I've been carrying around forever. And of course, I paid him back later afterwards. But if you go over to the website now, you can, and you decide to buy them, there's a discount code that has been up there for a while. I've been with Colby Valve, working with them for a couple of years now, and the code is Jeep Mama, MOMMA, and you can get a 10% discount if you buy their Colby valves. But anyway, they're really small, they're easy. You can put them in your center console. So that's another item.
I keep in my air tools bag, like I have an air compressor on the Jeep with a tank. So I actually, until I got a battery impact, I carried a literal air impact gun with me. So I also keep a hose in there for airing up tires and for the impact gun. And in the bottom of that bag, I have spare valve stems and I have spare Schrader valves, the little valves for the valve stems and valve stem caps, because the number of times I've seen all of those things either get lost or destroyed on the trail. I saved a Jamboree participant. They had one of those deflators that pulls the core out.
Yeah.
Right.
JT Brooks.
Yep. Somehow, well, the JT Brooks don't pull the core out. This is the one that has that dangling valve or thing on it, and then you like unscrew the valve and it's supposed to stay inside. Somehow they lost the valve, the core. I don't know how they lost it, right? But they're like, I don't know where the core went, and I ended up having to pull one out of my recovery box and put it in for them. Otherwise, they were going to be no tire for the day, right? So, but yeah, they get lost. Or the caps. You know, you take the cap off to air down. You might say, oh, whatever, it's just a plastic cap. Yeah. But if you don't cover that, then crap's going to get into there, and it could make it leak. So you got to put the cap back on. So,
and you may not use this stuff for yourself. You may use it for someone else on the trail, and you save their day. So, you know, pay it forward.
And in that vein, I didn't put these on the list, but I have a ton of just miscellaneous things, right? Like I keep a full toolbox. Like the same tools I use when I'm working on my Jeep in the shop is in the back of my Jeep when I'm out wheeling. I probably don't need all those tools, but it's good to have them if you do, right? I also have a box full of miscellaneous nuts and bolts and whatever that have either been left over from projects or came out of my Jeep and were replaced with newer ones. There was a point where I had a YJ and I had a transfer case drop on it. One of those that was just, it lowers the transfer case so that the drive shafts were at a better angle. Well, when I finally got a slip yoke eliminator and got rid of the drop, they were just like these cylinders that went over the bolts. So I threw them into the box. Well, I ran into a guy on the trail who was having trouble and his drive lines were too steep, and I gave him the kit. I'm like, here, you can have it. I don't need it anymore, right? So, you know, that kind of thing helps. I had a spare belt for the drive belt on the 4.0, right? I had replaced mine. The old one was still in okay shape, so I kept it in the back of the Jeep. I came across somebody at AOAA that was on a trail ride with OK Four-Wheel Drive, who's an off-road shop out in New Jersey, and he had broken his belt. And we were out there scouting for the Jamboree. I saw this guy stopped. He had a TJ. I'm like, hey, do you need help? I might have stuff to help you because I also have a TJ. He's like, not unless you have a serpentine belt for a 4.0 with AC. I'm like, I do.
As a matter of fact.
And he's just
move
like,
my kitchen sink and I'll get it to
he's
you.
He's like, you do? I'm like, yeah, hold on, let me grab it.
That is funny.
I got a personal thank you from OK Four-Wheel Drive. They called me at work. They happened to know the woman I was with, Penny. You know Penny.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I was with her because we guide together. They knew her. They called her. She told them my name. They called me up to thank me in person. I'm like, that's cool. Thank you.
Yes. How funny is that? What are the odds, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, once again on another tangent.
But
that's the point, right?
Right.
Like that's what I mean by if you carry this stuff and you have it, you can help other people even if you don't need it yourself.
A snatch block. For the longest time, I never had a snatch block, and once I moved out west, I used it all the time. I used it on the Rubicon Trail. I used it in Arizona, and then I used it in Colorado a lot. We did a lot of towing of vehicles and to get vehicles up on the trailer. So a snatch block is really good. I went to the Harbor Freight and got the Harbor Freight one, and it's held up just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have one
it's-
either, and I really need to get one.
Yeah, Harbor Freight, it's worked just fine. There's certain things that, you really should buy quality stuff, but the Snatch Block one, I've used the heck out of it, and the Harbor Freight one has held up
You
really
know,
well.
Harbor Freight, for a long time, they were really hit or miss. They have improved their quality in the past decade or so. The stuff I'm seeing coming out of Harbor Freight is like legitimately quality stuff at a lower price.
Right.
Maybe it's not as high quality as the thing that's twice as much.
Right.
But for the amount of time we use these things, maybe they're okay. Right.
Right.
But your mileage may vary, I guess.
A winch is always really, really good, especially if you're going to be doing like a lot of rock crawling, climbing up ledges, waterfalls. If you're just going to do forest roads, some overlanding, not so much as important. But if you are going to do some rock crawling, or if you're going to head out west and do the Rubicon Trail, you definitely should have a winch. And we'll later, I think in another episode, we can talk about winches and how they work.
CeeLo in chat says that their winch and Snatch Block and Tree Saver are all from Harbor Freight, and they haven't had any issues. So there's another glowing review.
A chainsaw would be good, especially if you're out west here, or even out east with down trees. A lot of forest fires have happened, and all trees are falling down.
Yep,
so trails.
I added that in because my dad has a gas-powered chainsaw, and I would bring it along when we were doing trail clearing and no other time, right? Because it's a pain in the butt to have gas, and it stinks and all that. Well, I got a battery-operated one, a Craftsman, uses the same batteries that my hand drill and everything do. And I've only used it, I think, once on the trail, but I bring it every time we go to the Jamboree because the number of times the Jamboree has been halted because a tree came down overnight, right?
Oh, wow.
So it's I mean, at AOAA, right? There's a lot of trees at AOAA, and if we hold this thing in August, there's generally the chance of severe storms in August. I've been to a number of these Jamborees where we've had a severe storm, right? And that leads to down trees.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing ruins your day like having to spend 3 hours trying to get around a down tree or get it out of the way. You have a chainsaw, you lop it up, and off you go, right?
And
so good to
drum
have.
roll, drum roll.
Yes.
Drum roll, blum.
So in the notes, we have high lift versus bottle jack.
And I love my high lift jack. Just saying.
I'm gonna
it several times, but I'm gonna turn this. I'm gonna give you the mic, Nate.
I'm gonna rephrase high lift versus bottle jack to high lift and bottle jack.
Yes.
They both have specific uses. They are both valuable on the trail, right? There is quite a movement nowadays where people say the high lift jack is too dangerous, leave it at home. And personally, I think that that's a problem with the way people have chosen to try to use the high lift jack over the years. The high lift jack is an insanely dangerous jack if you use it wrong. I mean, it's
any
a 4 foot.
Any tool could be.
It's a 4 foot piece of steel, cast iron, really. So it's heavy. That if you lift up your vehicle with it, it's very unstable, right? So you have to think about that when you're going to use the high lift jack. If you're comparing the high lift jack to a bottle jack, I argue you're using the high lift wrong. A bottle jack is for specific uses, like lifting a tire up to change it, or to make a gap between two things that are relatively close together. A bottle jack only has so much throw to it, and it is safer for any place you can use a bottle jack. I was on, I think it was an off-road consulting guided ride, or maybe it was even the Jamboree. I forget which one it was. And someone got a flat tire. And before I even got to them, they're already getting their high lift jack out of the back of the Jeep. And I said, no, put that away. And he's like, what do you mean? I have a flat tire. I'm like, yeah, get the scissor jack that's down in there with your spare tire. That will be safer and better for this job. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we changed his tire on the trail with his, the little screw jack that comes from the factory. So much safer than a high lift. However, if you need to pull a tree out of the way and you don't have a winch, if you need to, I don't know, I've seen fire companies literally spread open crashed cars with a high lift jack, right? That's what a high lift jack is for. If you need to lift the body off your Jeep like I did in my garage a couple days ago, that's what a high lift jack is for. So So anyway, as we've kind of already covered, the high lift jack deserves respect, just like your winch deserves respect. Just like any situation where your vehicle is in an unsafe situation deserves respect. If you're not comfortable using a high lift, by all means, leave it at home. But if you're willing to learn how to use it and you're willing to put in the time to actually like figure out how to use it safely, right? Then it is an invaluable tool on the trail. Mine, I've used only a handful of times on the trail, but it's there for when I need it.
Yeah, I've used mine several times. By the way, there is a safety video out there that has been approved by High Lift Jack. And it's a Jeep Mama video I did on how to safely use the High Lift Jack. Maybe I'll find it and post it up in the Facebook page for Off-Road Insiders. But yeah, it can be very dangerous. You just have to be very careful and know what you're doing. And even practice with it at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I did the first couple of times. I just practiced lifting my Jeep up and putting it down because you're not in a precarious situation. Because when you're off camber, your tires are on the rocks, and you just have to be very careful because your Jeep could slip a little. You need to be safe.
I used it just a month ago or so now, month and a half. A friend of mine and I were out wheeling. He has a Hummer H2. I made a video on it if anybody saw it. But he had gotten himself stuck where he had like this tombstone of a rock right up, not in his oil pan, but in that vicinity, right? And it was really jammed up in his undercarriage. And an H2 is huge and it's heavy, right? We couldn't get him forward or backward. We couldn't get a rock under his tire to get him to go, one way or the other to try to get him up off of this rock.
Yeah.
So I took the high lift and I looped, I think it was a soft shackle. I looped it through the spokes of his wheel.
Kind of like their lift mates.
Yeah, the lift mate would probably be better for it, but I didn't have one.
Didn't have one.
So I did that and I lifted up his front tire just enough that we could get some rocks underneath it to get him up a little higher, right? Again, I didn't have him 4 feet off the ground. I lifted it up just enough. We made sure that the e-brake was on. The rear wheels weren't going anywhere. I mean, the vehicle wasn't going to move, right? That's the whole problem we were trying to solve, but we were still careful about it. And I mean, yeah, I guess you could have done that with a bottle jack, but all the rocks were already in the way. I'd argue the high lift was a safer way to do it in that situation than a bottle jack would have been.
And that's the first situation, one of the first, probably maybe the second situation I used the high lift. We were in some rocks. I just got winched up a waterfall and we were in these rocks, and that's where I popped my bead because my valve stem, I broke my valve stem. But with the way the Jeep was, and to get the tire back up to, because when you popped the bead, the tire deflated and I dropped lower in the rocks, and we had to lift that part up so we could get everything back on the bead and the wheel and all that kind of stuff. So the high lift, and we used the lift mate, same type of thing.
Right. So in chat, Videos has some comments about the high lift. I'll just show them in the stream here. So he says, weight is the enemy. I have found the high lift to be, or I have not found the high lift to be worth the amount of weight, basically in your cargo area, right? It's heavy. And I'll say it's also dangerous if you don't have it well fastened down, right? If you're in an accident or rollover, the high lift becomes like a dangerous projectile if you don't have it tied down. I made little mounts welded all the way in the back of my roll cage, right behind the tailgate, so it's physically attached to the roll cage. So it's as far as it can be from the passengers, right? Unless you had it on the hood.
Mine's underneath my rear passenger seats.
Yeah.
Can't get out.
So that's what I do with mine. And he also says high lifts do have value, just not enough from his experience. Now, like I said, I've barely used mine on the trail. But when I needed it, right?
Exactly. Just like the shovel, I hear my next time I go wheeling, I'm going to need a shovel, right?
Right. So, and again, to each their own, if they don't want to carry a high lift. Oh, my other pet peeve, I personally believe the high lift belongs sheltered inside of the vehicle somewhere.
It totally does. And
so that the mechanism doesn't get all gummed up
Yep.
and rusty. Now, I know those folks over at the Northwest Jeepcast insist that it has to be on your hood because that's the proper place to get to it in the event of where you need it, right? I don't. Maybe if you put a cover over the mechanism, maybe then I could get behind that. But
when I
I
talk
think
to the high lift jack folks, they're not going to deter you from keeping it outside your vehicle, but they
Right.
recommend you keep it inside your vehicle to keep it lasting longer and being safe and not getting all gunked up with whatever it may get gunked up with outside of your vehicle.
Now, granted, it's not as much of a showpiece if it's inside your vehicle, though.
Right.
So, sorry about that.
So it is what it is, right? Safe,
But when I first got my high lift, I was a young man, and it was a showpiece. Although I did see the value in it, and I had it on one of those bumper mounts on the rear tire carrier.
Yep.
And within a year, the thing was so like rusty and gunked up that I decided this isn't a good place to keep it. And then I started keeping it home in the garage unless I was going wheeling, right? And now that the Jeep doesn't really drive much on the road, it just stays in the Jeep. But so and videos just agreed, or mounted anywhere outside. It doesn't belong outside.
No, it doesn't. And none of your recovery gear. I mean, your winch, obviously, but
yeah. And you can get a cover for your winch too.
Yeah.
To keep the rope lasting a little longer.
Oh, well, should we get to the news or
we're already
announcements.
We're pretty far in, so we'll try to get through this stuff relatively quickly, I think. I wanted to mention, if you guys follow Mischief Maker, Holly Fowler, she was injured in a freak ATV accident. And I don't even want to call it an accident.
She's a YouTuber.
She's a YouTuber. And I guess she got her start mainly on Instagram, I think. She did like Instagram live stuff. But anyway, she was in an ATV, quote unquote, accident. It was more like they did a jump with the ATV. The ATV did not, it was a UTV, I should say. It didn't like roll or flip or hit anything. It's just the way she landed, she fractured her spine, right? Now, she's a full-time YouTuber. You could imagine that probably means she doesn't have health insurance because YouTube doesn't give us health insurance.
No.
Right?
Or anything.
So you can imagine medical bills in the US. There's a GoFundMe to try to help pay for her medical bills, right? They're not trying to make a mint here. They're not trying to modify her Jeep like some people do with GoFundMes. They're just trying to pay her medical bills. So there's a link in the show notes. If you care enough to go do so, then go ahead. I didn't even look. Maybe it's already funded, but I'm sure she can use the help, right? Because not only is she hurt, not only does she have these medical bills now, but her livelihood is being threatened right now because she can't make videos because she's recovering, right? So even if you just want to go watch a bunch of her videos, that'll probably help her out. Pennies, but still, it's something.
Right.
So, I just wanted to share that because I think it's important to help out other content creators when they're in need.
And then you were searching around on Reddit, which is another sort of social media thing. And we've been talking about 4XEs a lot lately. And
and I just happened across this Reddit person, or this person posted on the Wrangler subreddit, which is basically like a little forum piece of Reddit. If you're not familiar with Reddit, it's basically a message forum is really what it boils down to. Well, they posted that their Wrangler 4XE almost caught fire.
Of course, electric.
Now, that was my first thought. Oh, some weird electrical thing. Well, it turns out, so if you don't understand how the 4XE works, it's a gasoline engine that's assisted by the batteries, right? The batteries are there. It's kind of like a Prius. Remember a Prius? It has an engine that will run the vehicle, but it'll also have the battery. You can run it 100% on battery if you plug it in and charge it, which is why it has the plug on the side, right? This guy was running it down the highway on the engine. The engine is turbocharged so that you can get the amount of power that you need out of it. And his turbo was cherry red. He posted a picture of it. It's like glowing red under the hood. And then sometime later, maybe like a week later or whatever, because I saw this about a week ago, he posted a follow-up because he'd taken it back to the dealership. He said he smelled burning. That's why he pulled over, right? He took it back to the dealership to have it looked at. Turns out that the turbo is water cooled, just like your engine is. And the coolant overflow had a hole in it So the coolant had leaked out, and that's why this happened, right? So it really isn't necessarily because of the electric vehicle, because I think the 4-cylinder Wrangler also has the same turbo on it. So this could have happened to a normal 4-cylinder Wrangler, because I think they're also turbocharged. I could be wrong. I've never owned a JL. I drove one like for a week while my wife's JKU was in the shop, because they gave it to us as a rental. But other than that, I've never really been too close to one. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's also turbocharged. So yeah, almost caught fire. Side of the road.
Crazy. That's my fear. Because you
Yeah.
hear that all the time, Jeeps just catching fire, or vehicles.
And yeah,
catching
remember,
fire.
was it the early JLs that were just
Yeah, there was
spontaneously catching
yes.
fire, like
And
in the
like
storage lots?
over there in Jeep in Ohio?
Yeah.
I think a bunch of them caught fire. I remember that. That was a couple years back.
Yeah, so the JL is plagued with pyromania, apparently.
Craziness.
Yeah.
So we were talking on one of the episodes, you were talked about how you wheeled in Paragon all the time.
Yes. I'm so glad we got to this news article, because it's important.
Paragon is was an off-road place back in the day in Pennsylvania, and they shut it down. And somebody shared a news story with me that they're opening it back up, or they're talking about opening it back up. Is that true?
So I've had a little bit of an inside scoop on this for, it might be 4 years now.
Were you keeping a secret?
Well, I don't know that it's supposed to be a secret or not. Kyle had mentioned it to me because he was involved in showing government officials around the land, right? Because him being who he is, he knows the park. He has an off-road business, right? So they contacted him to show him around. And he told me about it. And he's like, this could be big. And that's about as much as he told me.
Right.
This is like 4 years ago, he told me. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. Can I talk about that?
Right. Well, now it's out.
Well, now it's in the news, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, there's old coal mine land, very similar to what you'd find at Roush Creek and what you'd find at AOAA, in the Humboldt Industrial Park area of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. It used to be Paragon Adventure Park before the place blew up. I don't mean blew up like exploded, but blew up like became popular. Now there's an Amazon warehouse where the entrance to the park used to be. Yeah.
Huh.
But and I don't want to go too long on this because we're already going long, but basically the owners of the park leased the land from a landowner that owned all this coal mining land, right? It's effectively useless land. Well, the owner, they were in a 25-year lease, right? And they were following the terms of the lease. The landowner decided to make up quote unquote charges that were sort of like difficult to prove. And then he went to a crooked judge and said, I want these people off my land.
Oh.
It was a big deal. I mean, for those of us locals here that really followed it, there was so much corruption that involved. The judge ended up involved in this other scandal where they were sending kids into correctional facilities in exchange for money. So he lost his job and he's like in prison for as far as I know.
Oh, wow.
So that level of corrupt was this guy.
Sicko corruption.
Yeah. So, and these were like kids that were borderline trouble kids already. So it was easy to get that done. He wasn't just like plucking kids off the street, but kids that had records and whatever. He was basically getting them into correctional facilities because he got a kickback.
God,
it's insane.
Shame.
So anyway, the Nosps, which was the family that owned Paragon, got evicted from the land, had to close up their business. They now run, it's in Indiana, Badlands, the Badlands Off-Road Park. They went there because that park was in the process of like going bankrupt or something. They bought it and now they run that. So yeah, it's cool to see the land coming back. There's people that have been wheeling it even though it's been closed. I've been staying away from it, even though I'd love to get back in there and see what the place looks like. But I'm excited about this. And if you read the article, it's basically, it sounds like it's going to be a similar project to what AOAA is, where the state owns the land and they manage the use.
And they're reclaiming it. They're reclaiming the land back.
Right. And so the idea is that it will be used responsibly instead of, a bunch of irresponsible folks in there doing whatever they please. Right. Not that Paragon was that, But right now, that's what's going on. I'm sure there's people in
Right.
there having parties, and there's people in there doing stuff they shouldn't be. That's an ecological problem. I'm not a tree hugger, but I do like the planet we live on. And I
Right.
do like being able to use the wilderness. There's a fine line there.
Right.
So anyway, I'm excited about this. I think it'll be pretty cool if Paragon comes back, even if it's under a different name. They did have a name in there. I forget what they called it. It's like off road. It's a very government run sounding name.
Of course.
Like the Luzerne County Off-Road Recreation Area or something
Right.
like that.
So a really quick news story here. There's been a lot of debate about how to pronounce the Willys Jeep. Some people say it should be Willis. Some people say it should be Willys. Well, Jeep
Right.
officials at Jeep have finally come out and said you can pronounce it either way you want. Because back in the day, they have found in Jeep commercials, officials pronounced it both ways. Even people way back pronounced it both ways. Yes, it's Willis Overland is the name
Right.
of the guy who started it, but people say Willys. Willys is just the way most people say it, but just you can pronounce it however you want.
Yeah, people on the internet like to be pedantic, is what it comes down to.
Yeah. So,
And
what about this?
Give me
Cherokee?
30 seconds for this one, because
you have to.
we got to talk about this one.
Yes.
Have you ever been so stuck that you felt like you needed an airlift to get out?
Holy cow! Can you? That bill.
I've been there, right? Where it's like, oh man, I'm so stuck. I don't know how the hell we're gonna get out of this. And you figure it out, right? Well, this guy was wheeling in Alaska in a stock ZJ. That's like a late 90s Grand Cherokee on some wilderness trail that I think they said on Onyx Off-Road is rated a 6, which is like a medium, right? I guess they go 1 to 10. And I don't know if he was following Onyx and that's why he was there, or if he knew about the trail and they just used Onyx as a comparison. So I'm not trying to say that he's there because of Onyx Off-Road. Anyway, he got so stuck that they had to send a Black Hawk helicopter in to airlift him out.
Oh, look at! You should go.
It's
to
crazy.
This Jeep is upside down.
Yeah, they have it. I don't know where they put the straps on it, but they have it in the picture. It's on its side as they're airlifting it away. I'm like, oh my gosh! Could you imagine that recovery bill?
Well, that'd be like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of
It
dollars.
had to be. I mean, I've heard estimates that just to like prep and take off in a helicopter is thousands of dollars in expense, just for the fuel and the crew and everything, right? And then to like go airlift your Cherokee out. Oh my gosh.
So I'm looking at my video and something blue in the side. I'm like, oh my god, it's my curtain blowing.
It's your curtain. I saw the curtain. Yeah.
I thought someone was in my apartment. Was
it going to be one of those TikTok videos where where people break in and kidnap you?
Yeah.
And they'll all be like, "No, Tammy."
It looks like a storm's coming.
Oh, okay. Well, we're almost done anyway.
Yes.
Which is good, because we don't want you to like lose power in the middle of the show.
No.
Because then you guys would have to just listen to me talk. And
oh yeah, and you'd ramble on for hours.
I would.
We're over time.
We are over time. We should finish up.
We're trying to keep on an hour.
Yep.
So what are we going to talk about next week, Nate?
All right. Next week, I have trouble using the word inclusive, but that's the word we're going to use because it has such a negative connotation.
It does.
But we're going to talk. I did a video, it might be 2 years ago, maybe longer ago, about get out there and wheel. That's like, it's a tagline I've used ever since, right? Because I feel like people should get out of their own ego and go wheel. And the people you're wheeling with should also get out of their own ego and accept you for being there as part of the sport. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Basically, get out there and wheel, be inclusive on the trails.
And it's ironic, I helped do a basic 4x4 class. I ran a 4x4 class here at TNT.
Sweet.
And me and this lady who was there, we kind of talked about that, and how uncomfortable she felt in certain situations with certain people. And, so that's what we're going to talk about Not next week. In 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Or is it? Did we decide it's 3 weeks because of the?
Oh yeah,
2?
it's 3
Is
weeks.
it 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
Well, we never really decided, but
We
I think
didn't.
we should just.
We didn't, folks. If you're listening, we're trying to decide whether we should stick to the first and third Monday, or if we should start doing bi-weekly.
Like
every other Monday, regardless of how many Mondays fall in a month.
Right.
Which would be easier for you guys for the live stream. I don't know that it matters too much. At one point, I felt passionately that it was easier to schedule if you said the first and third Monday, but now I'm not so sure.
And Nate's going to be gone one Monday in August, and I'm going to be gone another Monday. So
we'll figure it out.
Go subscribe to YouTube, and you'll be notified when we upload.
Yeah, I'm going to be on vacation for the one, and I think on
You're
the
going to be
business
gone
trip
for the 21st, and I'm gone the 14th.
Right. Anyway, there will be some shows we may miss, so we may have to move them around. So anyway, CeeLo says every other Monday works or would be fun.
Okay.
So
we'll see you.
If that's the only vote we get, then
right.
Then it's decided.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. 2 Mondays.
Yep, we will see you then. And we're on Instagram now. I forget if I mentioned that last time. Find us on Instagram, Off-Road Insiders. JeepMama.com is where you can find Tammy. SWBcrawler.com is where you can find me. And of course, all of our other properties are linked from there. Facebook. We're also on Facebook. So, and also you should be able to find us wherever you look for normal podcasts. And if you can't find us wherever you find podcasts, let us know. We'll try to get listed. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Now I got to go find the music. It's over in this other tab over here.
Happy Jeeping, everyone.
All right, folks. Everybody have a great 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 Mondays.